Do you specifically recollect which of those two individuals directed you to fill in that particular check?
I do not. That was 93.
Yes?
No, I don't recall.
Your Honor, it would appear since I turned the page and I don't find an endorsement that I neglected to copy the back of that check. So if I may have a moment, I will find the original and counsel can look at it.
While counsel is doing that, may I be excused again for about 4 minutes on the same basis as last time?
Any problems with that, counsel?
It's fine.
Okay.
I apologize for the omission, Your Honor. Ms. Hoskins, showing you check number 5256, which we've just been discussing, and the back of that check, do you recognize that endorsement?
It's my endorsement.
Turning on about 5 pages to Mr. Tyler, you are the plaintiff in this lawsuit, is that right?
That's right.
Again, I am Ms. Jameson, and I am your attorney, and I am going to ask you some questions about the accident that relates to this lawsuit. First, what is your residence address?
9160 West Mill Road, Alta, California.
How long have you lived there?
About 30 years.
Do you have any children living at home?
No, sir.
How old is your youngest child?
That's a good question.
Who is your current employer?
I work for myself.
You are self-employed doing what, sir?
I operate an orchard and I drive a truck.
Is the orchard located at your residence address you just gave us?
That's correct.
And that's
Mill Road, correct.
Please allow her to finish her question before you answer. You may anticipate what she is going to ask, but please wait.
Okay.
The reason is that the court reporter can't take two people talking at once. How large is your orchard?
20 acres.
What type of orchard is it?
Almonds and walnuts.
When were your walnut trees planted?
About 1982.
How many acres are in walnuts?
About 3.
When do the walnuts start bearing?
They usually bear in about 4 years.
4 years after planting?
Yes.
With respect to the almonds, when was the almond orchard planted?
About the same time as the walnuts.
When did the almonds start bearing?
Just recently, last year, they were minimal.
Now, the accident we are discussing occurred on September 2nd, 1982. As of that time, how were you earning your living?
Objection. Irrelevant, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer.
I was driving a truck for Richard's Transportation.
Who is Richard?
Well, he operates a fleet of trucks.
What is his first name?
I don't know.
Where does he do business?
He operates in California and Nevada. His main office is in Gilroy.
Were you working out of the Gilroy office at that time?
Yes, sir.
When you were working for Mr. Richards, how were you compensated?
I was paid by the trip.
With respect to your payment by the trip, were you utilizing your own equipment?
Yes, I used my own tractor.
How much would he compensate you per trip?
It depended on where I went.
What were your usual destinations?
I would go to San Francisco and Oakland and some short runs here in the valley.
Where would you do most of your hauling from?
Well, I was generally dispatched out of the Gilroy yard and I would haul within a 150-mile radius.
Where would your loads originate?
Normally, if we were going to haul cotton, we would haul it from Fresno to Oakland. We would pick up piggybacks, which are on railroad cars.
Did you have to pay your own expenses out of the 90% you got per trip?
Objection, Your Honor. There is no testimony. He got a percentage. Further, it's suggestive.
Sustained.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lead you. Did you receive a percentage of some amount for each trip?
Yes, sir, 90%.
And the question is, did you have to pay your own expenses out of that figure?
Yes.
How much would you generally receive for a trip from Sunland to San Francisco?
Maybe $150 less my cost.
How about from Fresno to San Francisco?
That depends on where I started from. I would either be starting from Gilroy and then pick up a load in Fresno, so it varied. It could be about $200.
What sort of records did you maintain about the trip you made?
I had a logbook.
Do you have any records concerning what you were paid by Richards?
Yes, I have paychecks.
Would Richards deduct Social Security and income tax from your checks?
No, ma'am.
Did you get a W-2 form every year from him?
No, because I wasn't his employee. I did my own income taxes.
Did Mr. Richards provide you any paperwork to show how much he compensated you each year?
Well, he would have a quarterly report showing what my earnings were.
Were those 1099 forms?
I don't think so.
With respect to 1981 and up to the time of the accident, how much did you receive from Mr. Richards?
I can't recall at this moment.
Can you give approximate figures?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled. You may give an estimate.
I can give you an estimation because I don't have the records in front of me.
I will accept an estimate at this time.
Between 16 and 20,000.
From those figures, did Mr. Richards deduct anything?
He would take out the fuel cost,
And what would you have to pay yourself?
maintenance of the tractor, insurance, and repairs.
Would you have to pay for your own meals?
I brown bagged it generally.
If you were required to stay overnight someplace, would you be reimbursed for your motel or hotel expense?
No, I usually slept in the tractor. I have a bed in the cab.
Is that what they call a sleeper cab?
Yes, correct.
Do you have any paperwork showing the maintenance figures on your truck for 1981?
I believe so. I can't recall the figures now.
Before we get to the accident itself, I would like to ask you some questions regarding your orchard.
All right.
What time of the year did you start planting the walnut trees?
It would be the planting season, which was usually between January and April.
Before that time, had you been engaged in any sort of farming operation?
Yes, I had almonds there before, but I had to dig them up.
When was that?
While that was in progress, I was driving the truck because I had to subsidize the place.
So sometime in 1981, you pulled out the almond orchard?
Correct, yes.
When did you get your initial crop of walnuts?
Last year was really the first significant crop, which was about 8 boxes.
Last year was 1986. Am I correct in stating you got your first major crop in 1986?
Yes.
With respect to the almonds, when did your first almond crop come in?
Last year too, but I only got about 1,400 pounds. That wasn't profitable.
As a result of this accident in 1982, you had to hire someone to work your almond and walnut trees. Who did you hire?
Objection. States facts not in evidence.
I agree. You seem to be testifying for your client. Just ask questions, please.
Did you have to employ additional help?
Yes, ma'am. I hired a couple of neighbors.
Was the entire orchard planted by April 1982?
There were 10 acres. I had 3 acres in walnuts.
When was the planting finished?
This year.
Were the 3 acres of walnuts in as of April 1982?
Yes, they were.
Was there any additional walnut acreage put in at any time?
Yes, there were 4 more acres at that time, but they didn't produce. We had to pull them out and consolidate them into the adjacent 3 acres.
Please explain what happened with the 3 acres following that.
Well, we had vacant land until this year when we planted more almond trees again.
As of right now, you have 3 acres of walnuts and approximately 17 of almonds, is that correct?
That's correct.
You were injured as a result of this accident, is that right?
Objection. Leading.
Sustained.
Let me rephrase that. Did you suffer any injuries in this accident?
Yes, ma'am. My left hand.
Were you off work as a result of those injuries?
Yes, ma'am.
Did any doctor release you to go back to work?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately when was that?
It is in the records. I don't recall exactly. It was after about 4 months.
After your accident?
After the accident.
What doctor released you?
Dr. Sen.
Did you go to work right away?
No, it was about a month later.
Who were you employed by after that, if anyone?
I worked for Richards for a while.
Have you incurred any reduction in your earnings because of the accident?
That is hard to say because you get your trips through a dispatcher. I wouldn't really know. I guess it did diminish because I ended up going to work for myself.
When was that?
About 2 years ago.
Tell us why you became self-employed then.
Because there was not enough work coming in from hauling for Richards.
Why was your work with Richards less?
That I couldn't say.
Did anyone relate to you it was because of the injuries you received from this accident?
I don't know. They sort of inferred it.
Have you since hired anyone to do work in your orchard because you couldn't do it yourself?
Just minimal help.
Can you give me a dollar figure what it cost you?
Well, less than $500.
Is that the total amount since the accident?
Correct.
After the accident, when was the first time you were capable of doing any work in your orchard?
Well, I started to operate the farm equipment using one hand, but it was still giving me problems.
How long after the accident was that?
4 months in that range.
Do you remember where your accident occurred?
Certainly, it was the Logan warehouse.
Before 1982, had you ever been to that warehouse?
Yes, sir.
How many times before?
A few times.
You better explain what you mean by few.
Well, we hauled piggies out of there. They were usually barrels of tomato sauce and they were on pallets.
No further questions at this time.
You may cross-examine, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. With regard to yourself, had you ever backed up into this dock where the accident took place that night?
Yes.
Had you ever experienced any problems backing up to this dock at night because the dock lights blinded you?
Yes.
Had you ever complained about that to anyone?
It was not in the relationship with other drivers that you would complain about things like that.
Explain what you mean by that.
If you complained, they would say, "Don't you know how to drive a truck?"
So you never actually complained directly to Logan?
No.
So you don't know what they would have told you if you said anything about the blinding lights?
Objection calls for speculation on the part of this witness.
Sustained.
Are you aware of any other accidents that took place on this dock?
Not to my knowledge.
And before the day of the accident, had you had any problems backing your truck into this dock?
Just with the dock lights if it was dark.
You previously testified you got into your cab and pulled the door shut with your left hand using the exterior door handle. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Was it natural for you to reach out and use the exterior handle?
Yes, the window was open.
Why didn't you grab the inside handle to close it when you realized the other truck was approaching?
It was just a reaction.
We had testimony earlier that one of the dock workers saw you reach out and pull on the mirror.
Is that a question or a statement?
It was merely for foundational purposes. I want to question him regarding that. Did you have your hand on the mirror to close the door?
No, when my hand was actually closing the door, he pushed the mirror backward.
Your testimony is that you did not have your hand on that mirror. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was no reason to.
You were concerned about the other trailer breaking your mirror, weren't you?
Objection. He is leading the witness.
Sustained. Please do not suggest the answer in your question, Mr. Fong. You may proceed.
Were you concerned that the other trailer might break your mirror, Mr. Tyler?
No, I was not.
What would happen if a highway patrol officer saw you driving with a broken mirror on the left-hand side? Would he stop you?
Objection calls for speculation as to what a highway patrolman would do.
Sustained.
Did you have an extra mirror you could put on your tractor?
Not necessarily.
Was there any place close that you could have driven to have another mirror installed?
There is a small round mirror on there also, so that didn't bother me.
Would you have had difficulty backing up without a mirror at your next destination?
That probably would not have broken the bottom because it just slammed into the truck.
You believe the person who stated he saw your hand on the mirror was mistaken?
Yes.
Did you have any conversation with the other driver after the accident?
I saw him, but I was still in shock. He gave me his jacket to put over me.
Did he say anything to you?
He couldn't.
Did he tell you the lights over the dock blinded him when he was backing up?
He didn't say anything about the accident.
With respect to yourself, at the time the accident happened, was your trailer loaded?
Not yet, no.
How they started loading it?
I think they were preparing to. They had not started.
Could you hear any forklifts in the dock area or in your trailer?
I wasn't aware of any at that time.
As far as you know, the loading of your trailer had not commenced, right?
Objection asked and answered. That's been asked and answered.
Overruled.
You may answer.
Nothing was loaded yet.
At any time after this accident, do you recall anything the other guy said to you?
I saw him a year later.
Did he say anything then?
He said, "I'm sorry I ran into you."
Do you recall talking with anyone at Logan after that?
No,
Do you recall hearing anything that was said at Logan after the accident?
not really, no.
Has anyone mentioned to you at any time since the accident that the lights over the dock blinded the other drivers?
No, I talked to others since then because I brought it to their attention.
I have nothing further at this time.
Ms. Jameson, do you have any redirect examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. You may proceed.
How many times approximately had you hauled products from Logan?
Maybe 5.
When you had gone to Logan the day of the accident, how did you know to go to that location?
I was dispatched there by Richard,
Who dispatched you?
the dispatcher for Richard.
And what kind of paperwork were you given, if any?
Well, we were just told to go there. The paperwork would generate out of the Logan plant or warehouse.
When you arrived at the warehouse, where would you normally park?
At the entrance going into the unit, that was before we backed up to the loading dock.
Did you get out of your tractor and proceed to any office?
Yes, and the dispatcher would inform us what time we were expected to be unloaded and what dock number.
Were you ever provided any instructions other than when and where to report?
Nothing else unless they wanted you to move to another dock.
Subsequently, were you then instructed what dock you were to back into?
Yes.
You arrived at the Logan warehouse at what time?
It was dusk. I was already there before dawn. I'm sorry, before dusk.
Excuse me, we will take a short break.